Katie Holmes just shared a deeply personal tribute to James Van Der Beek, and in her own handwritten words, she revealed something far more intimate than fans expected. After his passing at 48, following a publicly shared battle with stage 3 colorectal cancer, Holmes didn't release a typical celebrity statement. Instead, she wrote about imagination, about trust, about youth, and about what it really meant to grow up together on Dawson's Creek. But what makes her message stand out isn't just the emotion. It's what it quietly tells us about the bond that lasted long after the cameras stopped rolling. And when you look at the timing and who else spoke out, a bigger picture begins to form. James Van Der Beek wasn't just the face of Dawson's Creek. For millions, he represented a specific moment in time: late 90s optimism, small-town dreams, complicated friendships, and the feeling that life was just beginning. He played Dawson Leary from 1998 to 2003, an aspiring filmmaker searching for love, identity, and meaning. And alongside him was Katie Holmes as Joey Potter, the heart of the story, and arguably its emotional anchor. Their on-screen chemistry defined an era of television. But what Holmes wrote after his passing suggests something deeper than scripted romance. In her Instagram tribute posted shortly after the news became public, she described writing with a heavy heart. She called his loss a lot to process. And then she said something striking. To share a space with your imagination is sacred. That's not industry language. That's not PR language. That's personal. It hints at what it's like to be young actors navigating sudden fame together, learning who you are while millions are watching. And according to publicly available interviews over the years, the Dawson's Creek cast often described their early days as intense but formative. They were teenagers and young adults filming long hours, building characters who would become cultural icons. Holmes referenced that time directly. She wrote about breathing the same air in the land of make-believe and trusting that each other's hearts are safe in their expression. Think about that for a second. In a show built around emotional vulnerability, trust would have been everything. And that trust, at least from her words, clearly lasted. She also mentioned laughter, conversations about life, James Taylor songs, adventures of a unique youth. That phrase stands out. Because for many viewers, Dawson's Creek wasn't just entertainment. It was part of growing up. It shaped how a generation talked about feelings, relationships, and ambition. But behind the scenes, these actors were living their own version of that story in real time. And Holmes didn't just focus on nostalgia. She listed qualities she admired in Van Der Beek: compassion, bravery, selflessness, strength. She described his life as the journey of a hero. Now here's where the timeline adds weight. Van Der Beek publicly shared his cancer diagnosis after being diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer in 2023. He later spoke about the challenges of treatment and the importance of family support. By all public accounts, he approached the situation with openness and resilience. Holmes's tribute acknowledges that battle, but without dramatizing it. Instead, she frames it in terms of character and integrity, an appreciation for life with the integrity that life is art, she wrote. That line feels intentional. It reflects how he built his life beyond the show: a marriage, 6 children, creative projects, and charitable efforts. And it also echoes something he said during a charity reunion event. In September 2025, much of the cast reunited in New York City for a live reading of the show's pilot episode. The event supported cancer and raised funds in his honor. Although he was unable to attend in person due to health concerns, he appeared in a pre-recorded message. In that message, he thanked the cast, crew, and especially the fans. He called them the best fans in the world, and he said he was humbled by their generosity. That humility is something multiple cast members referenced in their tributes. Busy Phillips, who joined the show in season 5, called him one in a billion. She shared photos from their time together and wrote that her heart was hurting, especially for his wife, Kimberly, and their 6 children. Mary-Margaret, who played Dawson's mother, described him as a gracious warrior and asked fans to respect the family's request for privacy. Notice something consistent here? Gratitude, strength, family. No sensationalism, no speculation, just remembrance. And that tone is important, because when public figures pass, narratives can quickly shift toward headlines instead of humanity. But in this case, his co-stars have centered something else: connection. Holmes closed her message by addressing Kimberly directly. "We are here for you always," she wrote, "and will always be there to shower you with love and compassion." That isn't a casual sentence. That's community. And when you step back, it reframes Dawson's Creek not just as a show, but as a shared chapter in many lives, cast and audience alike. The question now becomes, why does this particular tribute resonate so strongly? Is it nostalgia? Is it the reminder of how quickly time moves? Or is it the rare glimpse into what real friendship looks like after decades in Hollywood? Because unlike many co-star relationships that fade once filming ends, this group continued to show up for each other. The charity reunion, the public support, the handwritten note instead of a typed statement. Each detail adds depth, and perhaps the most powerful part isn't what was said, it's what was felt. Holmes wrote that she mourns with a heart holding the reality of his absence and deep gratitude for his imprint on it. That balance and grief and gratitude is something many people relate to when remembering someone meaningful. It acknowledges loss without overshadowing legacy. And that may be why this moment feels different, because it isn't about a headline, it's about honoring a journey. But there's one more layer to this story that often goes unnoticed, and it changes how we understand the impact of Dawson's Creek itself. And to see that clearly, we have to go back to where it all started. Part 2. If you go back to 1998, Dawson's Creek arrived at a moment when teen television was shifting. It wasn't just about high school drama. It was about introspection, long conversations, emotional honesty. Characters who spoke openly about dreams and fears in a way that felt almost theatrical, but sincere. James Van Der Beek's Dawson wasn't written as the cool character. He was sensitive, idealistic, sometimes awkward. He loved cinema. He believed in soulmates. He talked about life like it was a screenplay still being written. At the time, that was different. And Katie Holmes's Joey wasn't a background love interest. She was layered, guarded, yet deeply loyal. Their dynamic carried the emotional weight of the series. But here's what makes Holmes's tribute even more meaningful in hindsight. They were navigating sudden fame together. Teen drama series in the late 90s didn't have the same social media environment we see today, but they still created overnight recognition. Magazine covers, public appearances, fan conventions. According to interviews from that era, the cast often leaned on each other to stay grounded. Holmes's line about trusting that each other's hearts are safe in their expression suddenly feels like more than poetic phrasing. It sounds like survival. Because acting at that level requires vulnerability. And vulnerability requires safety. And when actors feel safe, audiences feel it too. That authenticity is part of why Dawson's Creek lasted 5 seasons and remains culturally relevant decades later. But life after the show took each of them in different directions. Van Der Beek appeared in various film and television projects, sometimes even playfully referencing his teen heartthrob image in self-aware roles. Over time, he became known not just for Dawson, but for his willingness to evolve publicly. Holmes pursued film roles and built a diverse career beyond television. Their professional paths diverged, as expected, but their shared origin story never disappeared. Which brings us back to something subtle in her tribute. She didn't just thank him, she thanked him for imagination. To share a space with your imagination is sacred. Why imagination? Because acting, and especially at a young age, requires stepping into fictional worlds together. You create emotional realities that feel real in the moment. You build memories inside scenes. You repeat dialogue that becomes part of cultural memory. Over time, those experiences blur into personal history. For viewers, Dawson and Joey were fictional. For Holmes and Van Der Beek, those years were real. Real sets, real conversations between takes, real music playing in trailers, real friendships forming under studio lights. Holmes mentioned James Taylor's song specifically. That tiny detail grounds everything. It suggests late-night talks, shared playlists, quiet moments away from scripts and cameras, and when she calls it Adventures of a Unique Youth, she's acknowledging something universal. Growing up is complicated. Growing up on television, even more so. Now here's where the broader cast reactions deepen the story. Busy Phillips' tribute described him as one in a billion. That phrase may sound simple, but it reflects rarity, distinctiveness. Mary-Margaret Holmes called him a gracious warrior, referencing his health journey with respect and dignity. Notice the language again. No dramatics, no exaggeration, just admiration. When multiple people independently use similar themes, strength, kindness, integrity, it paints a consistent picture. And consistency matters, because public narratives can sometimes distort reality. But when peers who worked closely with someone for years describe the same character traits, it builds credibility. That's why this moment feels grounded. Now let's talk about the charity reunion in 2025, a one-night-only live reading of the pilot episode. Think about that symbolism, the very beginning of the show, revisited decades later. It benefited Cancer and supported Beek. He wasn't physically present, but his pre-recorded message was projected on screen. He expressed gratitude, he thanked fans personally, he acknowledged the cast and crew. Even in absence, he participated. That says something. Because participation during a challenging health period requires intention. It requires energy. It requires choosing connection. And according to public footage from the event, the audience responded warmly. In many ways, that reunion became a full-circle moment. The show that launched their careers returned to support one of its own. There's something quietly powerful about that, and perhaps that's why Holmes's closing lines matter so much. She didn't end on memory. She ended on commitment. We are here for you always. That's not about the past. That's about the future. Support for Kimberly and their 6 children. Continued presence, ongoing love. And this shifts the conversation from nostalgia to legacy, because legacy isn't just about career highlights. It's about relationships maintained. It's about how people show up when it matters most. It's about character revealed in difficult seasons of life. Publicly available information indicates that Beek was open about prioritizing family in recent years. He often shared reflections about fatherhood and gratitude. Holmes's reference to creating a beautiful marriage, 6 loving children, the journey of a hero, reframes heroism. Not box office numbers, not awards, family, integrity, art. That perspective resonates beyond Hollywood. It connects to anyone who has watched a friend grow from youth into parenthood. Anyone who has shared formative years with someone and then watched life unfold in unexpected ways. And here's the deeper layer. Dawson's Creek was always about longing for a happily ever after. Dawson dreamed of cinematic endings, but real life rarely follows perfect scripts. Instead, it unfolds in chapters, some joyful, some difficult, all meaningful. Holmes's tribute acknowledges that reality. She wrote that she mourns with a heart holding the reality of his absence and deep gratitude for his imprint on it. Absence and imprint, loss and impact. That duality may be why audiences feel such a strong emotional response, because it reflects something many people experience personally. When someone meaningful leaves a space, their imprint remains in memories, in shared music, in inside jokes, in lessons learned, and sometimes in television episodes that continue streaming decades later. But there's one final piece that completes this story. And it has less to do with Hollywood and more to do with what stories like this remind us about our own lives. And that's where everything quietly connects. When a show like Dawson's Creek becomes part of popular culture, it does more than entertain. It becomes a timestamp. For some, it represents high school afternoons. For others, college dorm rooms. For many, it was the first time television characters spoke openly about vulnerability, ambition, and uncertainty. And that's where this story expands beyond Hollywood. Because when someone connected to those memories passes away, it doesn't just feel like news. It feels personal. Not because we knew them privately, but because they were present during formative chapters of our lives. Katie Holmes's tribute doesn't try to elevate James Beek into something mythical. She doesn't dramatize. She doesn't speculate. She reflects. And reflection invites the audience to do the same. What stands out most is her emphasis on imagination. Imagination is what built Dawson's Creek. It's what allowed audiences to believe in fictional friendships. It's what allowed two young actors to step into emotional territory that shaped a generation. But imagination also extends beyond acting. It's how people envision their futures. It's how families plan dreams. It's how artists create meaning from experience. When Holmes writes that life is art, she reframes legacy in creative terms. Art isn't permanent because it avoids difficulty. It's meaningful because it captures humanity. And Vander Beek's public journey, from teen star to husband, father of 6, and advocate during his health challenges, reflects evolution. Publicly available interviews show that in recent years, he spoke often about gratitude and perspective. Those themes align closely with how his co-stars describe him now. And that alignment matters because it suggests authenticity. Now think about the reunion event one more time. A pilot episode reading, the beginning of a story, revisited to support someone who helped create it. There's something symbolic about returning to chapter 1. It reminds us that stories are cyclical. Beginnings and endings exist within the same narrative. And in that pre-recorded message, when he thanked the fans, not once but repeatedly, it revealed something simple yet powerful. Connection outlives circumstance. Even when someone can't be physically present, their voice can still reach the room. Their influence can still gather people together. Holmes's final words in her tribute focused not on sorrow, but support. We are here for you always. It's a statement directed at his family, Kimberly and their children, but it also reflects something broader. Community doesn't dissolve when a series wraps. Friendships don't disappear when contracts end. Care doesn't fade with headlines. And that's perhaps the quiet takeaway here. In an industry often perceived as transient, this group has demonstrated continuity, respectful silence when requested, public gratitude when appropriate, support that extends beyond press cycles. There's no spectacle here, just remembrance. And in a media environment that often prioritizes shock value, that restraint feels meaningful. Because it allows space for family privacy, space for fans to reflect, space for gratitude to coexist with grief. If you look back at the core message of Dawson's Creek, it wasn't about perfection. It was about growing up, about navigating change, about learning that life rarely follows a screenplay, but it can still be beautiful in its unpredictability. Holmes's tribute mirrors that lesson. She acknowledges absence but emphasizes imprint. She mourns but expresses gratitude. She remembers youth but honors maturity. And that balance is what makes the moment resonate, not as a headline, but as a human story. When we think about legacies, it's easy to focus on career milestones, the iconic roles, the seasons of television, the public appearances. But sometimes legacy is simpler. It's the laughter shared behind the scenes. It's the music played between takes. It's the friendships that continue decades later. It's the way people describe you when you're no longer in the room. Katie Holmes's tribute reminds us that influence isn't measured only in screen time. It's measured in impact. And if there's one question this moment leaves us with, it's this: what kind of imprint are we leaving on the people who share our journey? If you'd like to continue exploring stories that highlight legacy, resilience, and the human side of entertainment, you can follow along for more. And as always, thank you for watching.